Support for this show comes from LeadQuizzes. LeadQuizzes helps you easily set up high-converting quizzes to capture and qualify leads for your business. Visit leadquizzes.com/podcast to get a 14-day free trial today.
It's super important to test ideas and test how the market responds to ideas. And I think what's important there is that you just respond to everything. You respond to every tweet, you respond to every comment, you respond to every email. Like you relentlessly kind of find out what makes folks there tick. And I think when you feel like you have a dedicated audience, a devoted audience, that your audience is consistently growing, it's not plateauing, and people are sort of sending you thank you notes with emotion, sort of speaking to how they like it. I think then and only then should you start creating a product.
From LeadQuizzes, it's Journey to Seven Figures, a show about entrepreneurs and the stories behind how they grew their business to seven figures and beyond. We cover the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the lessons they learned along the way. Welcome back to Journey to Seven Figures. Today I'm interviewing Clay Collins, co-founder and board chairman of LeadPages and now co-founder of Nomics. LeadPages has grown to over $30 million in revenue, 40,000 paying customers, 100 employees. They acquired the marketing automation software Drip to become a multi-product software company and have raised over $38 million in venture capital. Clay Collins is now the CEO and co-founder of Nomics, which produces the Nomics API. Nomics is the data backbone for the crypto financial system. Clay, really excited to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. So this is going to be an interesting episode because you've largely moved on from LeadPages and solely focused now on Nomics. And so this is going to kind of be like a postmortem around what you did well and what you would do differently. So I'm really excited to jump into this episode with you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Awesome. All right, Clay. So you largely started LeadPages out of like a community that you built up through a blog. So let's talk about like if you're going to start this over again, like how would you do that, and maybe a little perspective of how you started it.
Yeah, so LeadPages started out actually as a video blog. We had a video blog called The Marketing Show. And at the time, I was super jealous of Gary Vaynerchuk, who had a program called Wine Library TV. And now he's doing a bunch of other things. But back then, he had the most viewed wine content on the internet. And in each episode, there was no post-production, no editing for the most part, at least when he first got started. He would take 3 wines off the shelf of the wine place that he ran, and he would just review them in an ad hoc fashion. He'd sniff them, he'd taste them, and he'd comment on what he liked about them. His videos were like anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, and he would get, millions of views, hundreds, often thousands of comments. And I was super jealous when I saw this material because I wanted to create content that quickly. And, I wasn't able to, writing these long form, like thought pieces, right? When people say, oh, create epic content, like I was trying to create epic content, and I just don't think it was a good fit for how I operate. So I saw Gary Vaynerchuk, got jealous, and started producing videos where I reviewed landing pages that we had produced for our clients at a marketing agency back then. And not only would I review them, but I hired this like 18-year-old kid in Brazil to turn those landing pages into templates. And then I paid this group in India like $99 to turn those templates into HTML. And we gave them away for free as a lead magnet on the blog. And I started having comments in the blog where folks would ask things like, I can't install this as a WordPress plugin, or how do I integrate this with MailChimp or Salesforce? How do I run a split test? Basically, people wanted me to run tech support on these crappy HTML files that were produced by Chop Shop in India. Mm-hmm. And my first response was like, what do you guys want for free? And then I realized that there was just such overwhelming demand to solve the problem that these flat files purported to fix. And I thought there was an opportunity there. And I was really inspired by Kickstarter at the time, and people kind of going to their community and raising funds often as a discount to create a future product. So I went to the audience we had at the time. I said, we're going to create a product around your requests for these HTML files. It's going to cost $200 for early adopter access, $200 per year. And we got 200 people to give us $200. So we had 40 grand, and we hired a developer in the Czech Republic who was awesome. And yeah, we shipped the first version of that product 3 months later. then every successive like kind of week after we launched new features, new integrations, new landing page templates. All that was a much simpler and much more innocent time in the world of SaaS. And it grew like a weed. I've talked about this before, but yeah, we did like 2.5 million our first year, 10 million our second, 20 the year after that. So all this is public. What I said this while I was CEO, but we just grew really, really fast. It was a good journey. Did some things well, made some mistakes. One of the things that I think that was like, I'm really happy with the outcome was we acquired a email service provider. Now it's an e-commerce CRM called Drip, and got to work with those amazing folks. That business is growing by leaps and bounds. And yeah, altogether it was a great journey, I think. So I left August of last year and essentially went to the board and said, I feel like I'm a little bit, over my skis here. I think the sweet spot for me where I feel like most effective is around like 30 to 80, maybe even 100 employees. Past that, it's not just about managing people, it's about managing managers. And it's not even about managing managers. That's actually pretty easy. It's about managing the managers of managers. Yeah. So I recommended that we hire our COO. That's what the board did. I moved to chairman of the board, left the company, and started Nomics with someone who created a product that I wanted to acquire. So I actually met them through a potential acquisition opportunity, and we created Nomics. So it's been a fun journey.
Awesome. That's an amazing story. I'd love to jump into some of like the lessons you've learned. So like the first one is largely around creating content community first. So you did that with like your blog, you built up an email list and launched your product. So why is that so important? Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this. So I think that people are fooling themselves if they think they can get folks to pull out their credit card and pay for a product if they can't even get folks to enter their email address in a form. Like if you can't get someone to opt in to be a member of your community, the chances of them actually giving you money is far, far less. And I see folks who like literally cannot attract an audience, can't build an email list, thinking that if they just spend more time building a product, everyone's going to flock to it. That's just not the case. I think building a community first allows you to get intimately acquainted with the important players in a space. And most importantly, it allows you to sort of test messaging and get in touch with like the wants, fears, desires, et cetera, of a space. So like LeadPages really started off as a blog even before it was called LeadPages. And in each blog post, we'd find out after publishing, did this headline work? Did this messaging work? Sometimes we'd find that a post would get a lot of shares, but not a lot of opt-ins. Sometimes it would get a lot of comments, but not a lot of people opting in or sharing. Whatever combination would happen there. And we started learning how the market responded to ideas. And so in a similar way that when you have a SaaS product, you should really launch each feature, no matter how small. You'd find the minimal marketable event and you should market that. In the same way, like with content, each blog post is kind of a launch, right? Where you can see, what happens? Does this go like mini viral in your vertical or does it not? Do the ideas piss people off? Mm-hmm. And then you can find out like actually what kind of personas the content attracts. Like, are you creating content that attracts more B2B people, more B2C people? If you're doing a B2B play and everyone who's responding is like some hobbyist business person, trying to build a business over the weekend on the side, that's probably not good, right? And you shouldn't just be like, oh my gosh, these people care about me, because that might not be your business model. So I think it's really important to create a community first. And it doesn't have to be a blog. It could be a podcast. It could be a weekly webinar hangout with a group of people. What's important is just that it grows and the people are genuinely actually engaged. You should get daily emails thanking you for the content. I produce a podcast and I get daily emails with people talking about the content. We're getting 50,000 downloads per episode of the podcast. And I started that before we pushed any product live at Nomics. But the audience for that is institutional investors. So if I was hearing from hobbyist traders or people just doing it on the side like that wouldn't be a good signal, right? So I think it's super important to test ideas and test how the market responds to ideas. And I think what's important there is that you just respond to everything. You respond to every tweet, you respond to every comment, you respond to every email. Like you relentlessly kind of find out what makes folks there tick. And I think when you feel like you have a dedicated audience, a devoted audience, that your audience is consistently growing, it's not plateauing, and people are sort of sending you thank you notes with emotion, sort of speaking to how they like it. I think then and only then should you start creating a product. But what's great is once you have that community, you can solicit feedback from them about what they want. And I could talk about this forever about how to solicit feedback. There's a lot to say here.
Yeah, could we do it briefly? So I think it sounds like you're getting a lot of interaction with comment, with people responding to your emails, but are you also like surveying people? Are you calling people?
I think surveys are very much like at this point, it's probably a little premature. Folks can do it if they want to, but surveys are kind of pre-structured. So in a lot of ways, at that early on, I think you're leading the witness. I mean, you guys know all about this stuff, so I won't claim to know more than you, but I guess what I most enjoy then is just sort of the free form, someone asking something open-ended or, responding in a comment or emailing you or tweeting you. I'm sure you know how to do this the right way, but I tend to be just sort of as open-ended as possible right there. And it's kind of a conversational approach. Like, I think prior to this, I don't even know what to ask.
Okay. All right. So I think that's a good point. So the next thing that you guys did at LeadPages or like talking about here is like you guys really stayed focused. So you have this thing called the rule of 5 ones. Could you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah. So I think once you have an audience built to a certain size, I think it really behooves you to stay ultra focused. So most people, when they're trying to make growth work, they do everything under the sun and they end up kind of drowning and in this very complex scenario. So the rule of 5 ones is that when you're just selling product for the first time, you should have one product, not two. You should be marketing that product to one persona, like one kind of customer demographic or market. So don't sell to like large companies and small companies, right? Don't sell to men and women, like sort of write down a profile of a person that could be one individual. I mean, I guess that's the rule of thumb here is that you really have to market to one individual, right? So if you're creating a profile for a person, for the most part, like that person can't be a mother and a father at the same time. Although there's people identify as non-binary.
Yeah. So for LeadPages, for example, I'm sure you guys have agencies, you guys have people just starting their businesses, you guys have e-commerce. Like, so did you guys pick just one person to focus on to start out?
Yeah, we absolutely did. So one product, one persona. And this is super important that you be really focused on this persona, because if you don't, you can start getting feedback that'll like really screw with you. So for example, I know someone who was like kind of aiming up market, but they launched with an AppSumo deal, which, blasts their product to like millions of people on this list of folks that are, it's B2B, but it's really like B2C, they're kind of like consumer business owners. Most people on their list.
Very early stage.
Yeah, super early stage, like kind of weekend warrior kind of things. And so all the feedback that they were getting wasn't for their target customer. And it's just like really distracting. So unless you absolutely need the money, I would avoid doing things that aren't focused on who your persona is. So one product marketed to one persona, focus on one traffic source. So, is that SEO? Is that social media? Is that affiliate referrals? Is that paid media? But like really, really dial that in. That doesn't mean you have to say no or like, actively obstruct traffic coming from other sources, but you should be iterating on one traffic source that is likely a good match for that persona. Like, how does that persona find information on the product that you're selling? And so that traffic source should be sent to one conversion mechanism, right? So this is another area where people, I think, make mistakes, is that they'll try and sell via a sales page and phone calls and webinars, and all these things. It's like pick one and focus on that. And then focus on this combination for 1 year until you have consistent month-over-month growth. So again, one product marketed to one persona through one traffic source with one conversion mechanism. Do that for 12 months or longer, like until you figure out how that works. Otherwise, the complexities here compound. Like if you have two products with two personas, with two traffic sources, two conversion mechanisms, that's like, I'm not going to do the math. That's like 2 times 4 times 8. That's 16 different combinations, right? So it just gets really messy, and it's important to stay disciplined here. I also really firmly believe, I'm sure there's counterexamples where this doesn't work, but if you're a business that's selling a product for money, Like rather than maybe a consumer app, the goal is to go viral and be super huge and then maybe monetize with ads later. But if you're selling a product to someone who's pulling out their credit card and giving you money, I don't think you can outsource marketing for at least the first year or product. Like whoever the CEO is has to make sure that they're doing that, because there's just lessons there that you have to learn and you have to really struggle with this, or you're not going to be able to hire a team to do it later. Just as a side note, I think a CEO really only has 3 jobs. It's making sure there's always money in the bank, communicating the vision, and hiring people. Anything other than that is not something a CEO should be doing at any point during the company, at literally any point. So I'll just drop that in there too. Yeah, so that's the rule of 5 ones, and it's all about focus. So step 1, create the community. Step 2, focus on the rule of 5 ones.
Okay. And then, so do you feel like you executed that really well at LeadPages? And is that why you guys grew so quickly, like from 2.5 to 10?
To 20 and it goes on beyond there. But like after that, we get into non-public numbers, but it continues to grow and do well. But yeah, I'm not allowed to talk about parts where it was after I left.
Okay.
That's not for any weird reason. Anyone, when they depart a role, generally signs something talking about the scope of what they can talk about publicly, but it continues to do well and I'm happy.
Sure. No problem. Okay. So the next topic is kind of around lifetime value of customers and kind of the business model around that. So can we jump into that lesson next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to call this, I never set this up, but I'm going to call this the 5 laws of setting up a 7-figure SaaS business from scratch, because 5, and then there's a bonus 6. So the third is, I mean, most of the people listening to this are doing SaaS businesses, right? Well, I'll orient this towards SaaS people. If you're not SaaS or if you're e-commerce, then certainly ignore this. Although there's a lot to this if you are in e-commerce. So I think it's really important that if you can, that you architect your business to allow for unlimited account expansion. So I'm not sure how many folks here listening to this have done cohort analysis on their customer base or even know what that is. But the idea is that instead of lumping all of your customers into the same bucket when doing analytics, that you actually look at individual groups of people over time. So what's most common is to look at the cohort for a given month. So for example, there might be a cohort of customers who joined in August of 2018. So that's the August in 2018 cohort. And there's these cohort analysis graphs that you can look at, which I think give you really interesting insight. And I can't really explain how they work here verbally, but they're really cool. Folks should check them out. So what is absolutely true is that once that August of 2018 cohort closes out, the number of accounts in that cohort cannot grow. So let's say you got 100 people, like you can't go back in time and add more people to that cohort. Those were the 100 people, for example, that joined in August of 2018. The only thing that can happen with that cohort is it can decrease over time, right? Businesses, if you have customers who are businesses, like people die, businesses go out of business. Given a long enough time horizon, like that will approach 0. So because you can't have cohorts that grow in terms of number of accounts, it's super important if you can make it happen that you have accounts within that cohort that can grow in size over time. So for example, like with LeadPages, there's 3 plans and there's a monthly and an annual plan. And if you have the top plan, there's no more you can pay us for that product, period. We can contrast that to Drip, which is an email service provider. Drip certainly, and this is just fact, there is no limit on the potential account size for a Drip account, right? Like if you have 500,000 contacts, you're paying us more than if you have 250. And if you have 1 million contacts, you're paying us more than if you have 500,000. You could potentially, the theoretical limit of the number of email addresses in each account is unlimited. Therefore, the amount you can pay us each month for one of those accounts is unlimited. And when you have this in place, right, when you have the potential for unlimited account growth, what that means is that each of those cohorts, again, let's say the August of 2018 cohort, each of those cohorts can grow in revenue over time because account expansion is more than making up for account churn. And that creates what's known as negative revenue churn. And it's a beautiful thing to have in a business. And when you have negative revenue churn, it means that you can stop adding new customers and your business will still grow. If you don't have this, you will eventually come to a place where you're adding an insane number of customers to the business each month, and you're either flatlining or declining. So let's say, as a thought experiment, you have 1 million users and you've got like 1% churn. This means like 1% of your customers leave each month.
Mm-hmm.
That means you have to replace 10,000 users. You have to add 10,000 users each month just to break even or just to maintain your size. Now, most SaaS products have greater than 1% monthly churn. But the point I'm making here is that no matter how much ass you're kicking, if you don't have this characteristic to your pricing, there will eventually come a point where you're just going to be treading water, right? It might be at 6,000 customers, it might be at 40,000 customers, it might be 50,000 customers, 100,000. Like that number will at some point arrive, or like that time will at some point arrive. So I think it's really important. There's a number of ways to do it. You can charge on some sort of metered basis, like with Drip, it's number of accounts or email addresses, on your list. If you're a company like Salesforce, it's about the number of team members you have on the platform, same with Intercom. If you're a product like SendGrid, it's the number of API calls that you make. There's a number of different ways to do this. And I think it's important, not that every single one of your customers or every single one of your accounts can grow indefinitely, but there at least be the option that you're not capping this. So yeah, that's rule number 3.
Awesome. And so I think you probably saw that a lot with Drip, where all of a sudden you introduced a new type of business model and you guys are able to grow a lot more because of that.
Yeah. So, I can't speak so much here, but I will say that sort of the business entity used to be called LeadPages, and LeadPages is still very much there and adding customers and stuff. But Drip is what the company is called, which is kind of interesting.
Okay. Awesome.
Like it's really odd for me to say that I'm the co-founder of LeadPages because LeadPages is now called Drip.
Yeah.
And Drip, there's the kind of reverse roles.
Okay.
Like, and that only makes sense, right? Like if you buy HubSpot, it's like HubSpot isn't named after their landing page creator. You've got the CRM and that has sort of these different aspects.
Yeah.
So really Drip is at the top of the food chain, so to speak, as I see it right now, not speaking on behalf of the company.
We'll get back to the show in a minute, but first a quick thanks to our sponsor, LeadQuizzes. If you want to grow your business to 7 figures and beyond, you must learn how to generate leads predictably. When I first started my business, lead generation felt like riding a roller coaster. I would have huge sales months and then months with nothing. This happened because I relied solely on referrals and networking to grow my business. Predicting growth and investing in the future were frightening because I didn't have control over my lead generation. That was before we created LeadQuizzes. Now I predictably generate leads in my sleep and have stopped worrying about where the next sale will come from. Top marketers like Neil Patel and Lewis Howes have used LeadQuizzes to increase their lead capture by up to 500%. Think about it. Quizzes are fun, engaging, and you can offer personalized feedback in exchange for your quiz taker's contact information. LeadQuizzes is a software that allows you to set up high-converting quizzes quickly without having to hire an expensive programmer. In fact, our users have generated over 3 million leads for their businesses. Take control of your lead generation today and start your 14-day free trial by going to leadquizzes.com/podcast. All right, so Clay, let's talk about the next lesson, which is for you guys around like hiring the technical co-founder.
Yeah, I think that this is something that a lot of people get wrong. I think most of the time when someone's starting out new with a tech business, they're just looking for someone who can build version 1. And I think that unlike content or unlike marketing, everyone who will ever work on a given product inherits the decisions and the work that was done really at the foundation. And so there's lots of different styles of developers. There's like hackathon guy who doesn't test. And then there's people who like sort of religiously implement test-driven development. We've got 100% unit test coverage at Nomics right now on the front end and the back end. And there's just a bunch of different profiles there. I think it's really important that, whoever your technical co-founder is, be vetted by other technical people that you trust and interviewed by them. especially if you're not the technical co-founder, and that they treat code as something that is community property. It's community. It's not their code. It belongs to everyone. And I don't know what more to say about this other than there's a lot of areas where I think you can be very short-term motivated and short-sighted. And I don't think this is one of them. I think this is one area where you kind of need to get this right from day one. Honestly, I think most of the mistakes that a business deals with are probably those sins were committed during the first 3 months of the founding of the company, like truly. And that's why they're the hardest, because they're like really difficult to undo. Law number 5 is also related to people and HR. The reason why I'm talking about these is because I really think that the biggest determinants of your success, there's really 3. The first is what you're working on. The second is who you're working on it with. And the third is how hard you work. And it really kind of goes in that order at the end of the day. Maybe there's a slight case for who you're working on it with comes first. But the truth is, if you're not in the right market, you're kind of hosed. So yeah, it really is in that order. Law number 5 is do top-down hiring. So I have a lot to say about this. I think most folks, when they're starting a business and it's starting to grow a little bit and they're getting overwhelmed, they're very focused on the specific tasks that they're doing that are overwhelming them. So they might be like, hey, I'm doing all these support tickets. I need to hire someone to I need to get this off my plate, right? It's almost like, you just take my crap that's on my plate and I'm going to hand it to you. And now it's going to be someone else's crap. And there's lots of different areas of the business where they're looking to quote unquote get stuff off their plate. And I think most people, their first few hires are individual contributors that are narrowly focused on doing one specific thing. The problem is that if your business grows, you'll end up in a scenario where you have a bunch of individual contributors with no leader and no one in place who can holistically think about solving the actual business problem that needed to be solved. So let's say you're building a marketing team. You might hire someone initially to write some copy, or, hey, I need a video created or post something on social media. Those are just jobs to be done. No one on that team is in charge of actually delivering an outcome, which is growth of the business. I really encourage folks, if they can, to hire a director of marketing or someone who potentially down the road can build the team under them. It's a much more difficult hire, because you need to find someone who can actually deliver outcomes instead of just producing work product. So you need someone who can deliver outcomes, who is okay with the fact that they don't have a team underneath them and is okay sort of waiting a little bit before growing out that team. So it's actually an incredibly difficult hire or role to fill. It's much harder to do this. Hiring in general is really, really hard. I think the biggest problem that most people encounter when they go to hire for the very first time is that they just don't know what excellence looks like in a given position. They don't. There's a lot of marketers out there, right? So if you're going to hire a marketing position, there's a lot of people who might come to mind. But when you start thinking about who's going to run customer success, like most people starting a business don't know a really awesome customer success leader. Mm-hmm. They might not know a really good startup CTO. They might not know what a really good CFO looks like, or, even a for hire kind of on the side part-time CFO. So there's all these positions that have an enormous impact on the business in the future, like, folks who recruit folks even, and the average business owner just doesn't know what excellence looks like in those roles. So a lot of people are in masterminds. I think the best use of a mastermind is to get intros to folks on members of the masterminds team. Like if there's other members of the mastermind that have large teams and can honestly say that they have an excellent VP of people or an excellent director of customer support or an excellent director of product, or whatever the role is. It's important, I think, for a CEO to find out what world-class really looks like in a bunch of these roles, and to figure out if they can hire world-class for those roles where they live locally. And if they can't, can they get people to move? And if they can't, better have a remote team. There's just a lot to figure out there. So I think it's really important to do top-down hiring. I think when you don't, you end up in scenarios where you install a leader for a team and they end up making the determination, like when you hire a world-class VP of X and you made all their hires for them, they might decide that actually that's not the right team configuration, or those aren't the people that they would have hired. And they either don't have the courage to like part ways with a bunch of those people, or they do keep undesirable situations, like situations that they wouldn't have created if they were doing it from scratch. And it just slows them down. So I'm a big fan of top-down hiring.
Okay.
I think it's something that's not talked about enough.
So you're looking at a core value match, but you're also looking for like these people that are experienced.
Yeah. And you're looking for folks who can handle, delivering outcomes, right? So here's how you know when you found someone who can handle a certain part of business. They don't come to you and say, hey, I love what you're doing. How can I help? I'd really love to help you out. How can I support you? Because the truth is, like, you don't have time for someone to be sort of a helper or an amplifier of what you're doing. You need someone to take an entire sort of department or team or section of the business and put points on the board.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing for them to help with. They need to deliver outcomes, not help you deliver outcomes. You're not looking for someone to help you deliver outcomes. You're looking for someone who can independently create those outcomes and hire a team to help them do it, but not to help you.
Okay.
So that's how you know. And I get this all the time with Nomics. I get people writing in and saying, hey, I love what you're doing. I would love to help. I do not need a helper. I don't have the bandwidth to create something for you to help with. The ideal people say, hey, it looks like you're doing sales. I've sold this kind of product before. I really think I could create a scenario where you don't have to think about this ever again. And it's just going to grow. So yeah, that's how I think about it.
Okay. So that's the hire that you're looking for. Once you have these people in place, the next step, number 6, is being brutally honest with your hires. So how are you then managing them?
Well, yeah. So it's actually, I wish I would have rephrased this. So it's not about being brutal as much as it's about having just absolutely upfront communication with folks. And that's a two-way street. This only works if they're as honest with you as you are with them. This cannot be a unidirectional thing. So, for example, at Nomics, for every hire, we do a monthly review. And there's a few components of the monthly review. The first is a two-way start, stop, continue. So the manager says what the employee should start, what the employee should stop, and what the employee should continue. And the employee then tells the manager what the manager needs to start, stop, and continue. And it's better for these kinds of things. It's usually better if the employee goes first, honestly. I think it can be a little less intimidating that way once you got this process up and running. Next, after you transition from start, stop, continue, you can transition to what we do here. We talk about continuation and promotion. So during this section, the employee tells the manager what they need to enthusiastically stay at the company. So the question is, I'm the manager, I'm talking to an employee. What do you need to enthusiastically stay here? And you're basically saying, is there any reason why you'd leave? What's wrong? And so they answer it. Sometimes they might just frankly say, I need to make more money, or I don't feel like there's growth opportunities for me here, or I need to have growth opportunities. The point here is to catch people before they leave or they get recruited away. So you're just always talking about this. So after the employee tells the employer what they need to stay, the manager tells the employee what they need to stay in their current position, right? What they need to keep their role. And it's basically the inverse of the first question. The third question is the manager tells the employee what they need to do to get a promotion. I think at all times in this relationship, the company needs to know what the employee needs to stay in the role. The employee needs to know what they need to do to keep their role. And the employee needs to know where they need to get to in order to get a promotion. This is not something that most people do. Most employees don't have this information, much less a monthly one-on-one. So I think this is key. And then finally, the third component is two-way color rating. So the manager tells the employee if they're a red, a yellow, or a green for the month. And then the employee tells the manager the same thing. actually they rate themselves. So the first is the manager rating. The manager tells the employee if they think as a manager, they're a red, a yellow, or a green in terms of how they've performed as a manager. And then the employee gives them what they feel the answer is. So a manager might say, hey, you know what? I've been traveling a lot. I haven't been here for you. I think I'm probably a yellow for this month as a manager. And the employee might say, yeah, you are a manager. Or they might say, you know what? You gave me autonomy. You gave me direction. And even though you weren't here to make every decision, I knew that I was empowered to do what I needed to do. So you're actually agreeing, even though you describe yourself as yellow. That might be the case. Who knows in this fictitious scenario. And then they'll do the same thing for the employee. The employee will say if they think they've been a red, a yellow, or a green. And the manager will then, confirm or correct that self-review. Yeah. So I think it's really powerful. It makes sure that nothing is swept underneath the rug. And I think it cuts to the heart of a lot of problems that are experienced in HR situations.
Perfect. Okay. Well, Clay, I think these have been really helpful. Let's go through just a couple quick questions before we wrap up here.
Yeah.
Clay, what's the one thing you did that had the biggest impact on your growth?
Getting really good at webinars.
Okay. So your conversion process.
Yep. The conversion process.
Okay.
And it's not because webinars are like the best conversion channel ever. It's just, it has to do with the process you go through creating a webinar and then doing it over and over again and refining your pitch in real time and then responding to questions. I think it's a really great way to nail your sales message.
Okay. What's an area that you personally had to evolve and grow in to grow your business?
Oh, I think it's absolutely the people side of the business, learning what excellence looks like in different positions and not being so focused on product and marketing that you fail to understand the mechanics of what is needed from a people side to make things work. And by this, I don't mean that you need to be a therapist or, your job is to constantly be sort of agonizing over difficult things. What this means is that you need to understand how top performers operate. You need to understand who they are, how to identify them. And then you need to be as absolutely forthright and transparent about what's happening, because top performers, if they're given the primitive data points, if they're given all the information possible, they'll generate great outcomes, but you just can't shield that from them.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, Clay, where can people learn more about Nomics and connect with you?
Yeah. So if what you heard about Nomics sounds interesting, I check out the Nomics API. Just Google Nomics API, or you can just go to nomics.com. So it's nomics.com. I'm also available on Twitter at Clay Collins.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll get those linked up in the show notes. Clay, this was an interesting episode for us, a little different than we've done before, but I really appreciate it. I think you have some amazing lessons to share after building quite a big company with LeadPages and Drip and now moving into Nomics. So thank you.
Yeah, happy to share what I know, what the limited knowledge I have, but hopefully it's helpful to someone. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks again for listening to our show this week. If you want to find out more or hear previous episodes, you can go to blog.leadquizzes.com. If you'd like to start generating more leads for your business and get a 14-day free trial to Lead Quizzes, go to leadquizzes.com/podcast. Please also subscribe to our show on Apple or however you get your podcasts. You can also write us at support@leadquizzes.com. I'm Jeremy Ellens, and you've been listening to Journey to 7 Figures.